My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Let me start with an Australian joke about the English, just to prove that the Australian claim that we Brits are too stiff and serious and can't laugh at ourselves is totally false. Anyway, here's the joke. How can you tell that an English plane has landed at Sydney Airport? Because the whining goes on after they've turned the engines off. Now, at the risk of explaining the joke, to explain a joke is like sinking a ship. The basic idea is that our Australian friends are claiming that the low, constant rumbling noise which comes from plane engines once they stop isn't so much mechanical as an Englishman or woman whining or whinging or complaining, be it about the weather, the lack of legroom, the low quality of the tea, or whatever. It's a classic quip based on the stereotype of the English being perpetual grumblers. Well, I want to grumble about being called a grumbler. Or by doing so, am I merely proving the stereotype? Oh dear. Anyhow, I mention this because today's readings have the theme of grumbling, of moaning. In those days, the people thirsted for water, we read in the first reading, and grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt, to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" It was a serious moment. The people were close to stoning Moses, so he prayed to God, who told him to strike the stone for water to come out of it. And then we read, "And Moses did so, in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the quarrelling of the people of Israel, and because they tested the Lord by saying, 'Is the Lord among us or not?'" So here we have groaning, grumbling linked to water. The Gospel also gives us an episode of groaning, of grumbling linked to water, though it's slightly different. Jesus arrives at a well near a town in Samaria called Sychar. We're told he was weary and that it was about the 6th hour of the day, i.e. around noon, midday. Jesus, humanly speaking, we see you are tired, so tired that you stay at the well while the disciples go off to buy food. But really, in your divine nature you stay, because you know that a woman will come that way, and you want to meet her to bring her salvation. So we read, "A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' Now this is surprising, and it surprises the woman, and she answers, 'How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?' St. John then explains why she says this. For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Well, that's actually a massive understatement. It would be more accurate to say that Jews and Samaritans hated each other with a vengeance. Now's not the time to go into this, but suffice to say that a Jew would never have drunk from a container which a Samaritan had drunk from. So the woman was genuinely surprised. But in her response, we also see that she was feisty, or perhaps better said, testy, in the sense of being irritable, sharp-tongued. We could even say grumpy. Her response to Christ is downright rude and shows that she fully shares the prejudices of her people against the Jews. It's to be assumed that she recognized Jesus' Galilean accent, i.e., that he was a Jew, not a Samaritan. And what quickly becomes apparent in this scene is that this is not a happy woman. First of all, there's the detail that she's going to get water alone at midday, which is the hottest hour of the day. Why doesn't she go for water in the early morning with the other women of the village? The reason soon becomes clear. Her life is in a mess. A discussion ensues about water, in which you, Jesus, offer her the spiritual water of grace. But she can only think about running water. So you say to her, "Go call your husband and come here." And how does she answer? She tells a sort of convenient lie, or at least a half-truth. The woman answered him, "I have no husband." We then read, Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." Whoa! We can almost feel like saying, ouch. You really strike her, Jesus. You really get into the mess of her life, and we can see that she wasn't comfortable. She didn't want you to get into her personal life, and let's just say that she was economical with the truth. But you, Jesus, show that you know only too well the sordid state of her personal life. This woman must have been both very seductive in order to win 5 men, and now be living with a 6th, but also impossible to live with, so they all divorced her. Remember that in those days in Israel, only men could initiate divorce proceedings. This unhappy woman, spurned by the other women of the village for her difficult character and her sordid marital situation, goes alone each day, lonely in the blazing heat, to get the water she needs for survival. But she's quick too with her tongue, firing back barbed replies like the one she tried to give Jesus. And she's also cagey about her private life, and she doesn't want to open up because she's ashamed of it. She then tries another trick, which people often do. When you, Jesus, enter her life, she tries to get out of it through an argument. That's a very typical trick, isn't it? When you present them with an uncomfortable truth, people try to dodge by starting an argument. So she tries to start a religious argument, going back to that long dispute about where God should be worshipped, whether it was in the temple in Jerusalem or here in Samaria. The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet." You can almost see her coughing out that statement, so embarrassed she must have felt. And she continues, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." This woman is a grumbler, sharp-tongued, lonely and bitter, seductive no doubt, perhaps physically attractive, but impossible to live with, full of prejudice, and who avoids facing up to her own problems by arguing with others. Are we like that in any way? Instead of accepting a correction, we bite back. We start an argument. Corrected ourselves, we accuse the other. We live by grumbling. Jesus, you then get to work on the woman's soul, and we see that little by little you act to change her heart. First of all, you tell her that worshipping God isn't confined to a stone temple. We can worship God everywhere, as long as our attitude, our heart is right. Jesus said to her, "The hour is coming, and is now here, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Lord God, may I also worship you in spirit and truth. I don't just want to come to church and give you empty lip service." Elsewhere, Jesus, you rebuked the Jews when you said, "This people honors me with its lips, but its heart is far from me." Jesus, I confess that I can come to church and my heart is far from you. I come to church, I receive you, but I do not change. I go out of church and I grumble, I gossip, I criticize, I complain. I have received you, my Lord and my God, on my tongue, and I use that same tongue like a snake, biting, pouring out venom. And perhaps I do so because of the bitterness, the venom inside me. I grumble on the outside because I am grumbling on the inside. I am never satisfied. My prayer is not prayer to God, not trusting in him, but complaining to him. Lord God, I don't want to test you like the Israelites in the desert. Is the Lord among us, with us or not? Of course you're with me. You're always with me. The real question is, am I with you? Am I following you faithfully or not? And sometimes I may have to say that I'm not. Sometimes I'm like the Samaritan woman. I choose the way of sin, and when I'm confronted by my sins, I bite back. I dodge the blame by blaming back, starting an argument, just as Adam and Eve blamed others in the garden. But Jesus, what's beautiful in this episode is how you change the woman little by little. She begins hostile, and yet you talk to her of spiritual water, the water of grace. You talked of true worship in spirit and truth, and gradually she changes. That difficult woman who first used her tongue like a knife to strike at you, now uses it to proclaim you. She tells her fellow villagers, "Come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?" And they come out to see her. How beautiful, how powerful, and yet how gentle your grace is, Jesus. That lonely, bitter woman, the grumbler, now becomes an evangelizer. That's a far better use of our tongue. Don't use it to grumble, use it to share joy with others. We finish turning to you, Mother, and in so many ways you are the opposite of this woman. Jesus came to this woman in her bitterness and pride. He came to you, Mary, in your humility and joy. You see yourself as lowly, as a humble handmaid, and you go to share your joy with your cousin Elizabeth. Christ met this woman at a well, but he made you, Mary, a well yourself. His water, his life, gushes up in you. And now we come to you to drink that living water, which he gives us through you. This woman tried to dodge when she was faced with the mess of her life. But you, Mother, in your perfect holiness, committed yourself totally to God's will. Help us to be like this woman, however, as she converts to your Son. Turn our bitterness into joy, our loneliness into communion with others, our sad grumbling into cheerful proclamation of your Son. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections and inspirations you've communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.